Today's video, we're putting together a 386 SX PC.
We review old technology from games to old PCs, and don't forget the toys. Yeah, ancient electronics, we cover it all.
Alright, so what is a 386 SX build and why am I making one? Simplest explanation is, in the heyday of the 386 in the 80s and early 90s, you had two varieties. You had the DX and the SX. Basically, the DX was the 32-bit version and the SX was the cut-down 16-bit version. So, sort of similar to a 286 in that regard. So in general, the SXs were cheaper, more budget-oriented. You found them in a lot of embedded systems or just like cheaper systems overall. I think on this channel, a long time ago, we looked at a 16 megahertz 386 SX system. So in general, they were kind of the budget version of the 386. Now, sometimes this confuses people because when we go to the 46 era, the SX and DX, what it meant was different. The DX were 46 chips with a math coprocessor built in, and the SX was a 46 without the math coprocessor. And that confuses some people because for the 386 it means a different thing. As a general rule, the SX CPUs do run a little bit slower than the DX version running at the same speed. So you have a 25 megahertz 386 DX and a 25 megahertz 386 SX. The SX is going to run slower than the DX. So the question is, why would you want to build a SX system? It kind of depends on the person. I mean, there really is no reason I could think of to specifically build an SX machine. I have a specific reason, which I'm going to talk about right now, but really there's no reason to build an SX in this day and age. Back in the 80s or the 90s, you probably would have went with an SX just because it was cheaper or maybe what was available for you in your area. But in 2024, for a retro gamer building a 386, there's no reason. You probably just want to go with a faster 32-bit DX chip. Now, specifically for me, I usually don't really need a reason. I just kind of like building these things, but I'm actually building this SX machine to fit into my kind of like permanent setup. I do plan to use this machine quite a bit. Now, for me specifically, why I'm building a 386 SX system is for a certain type of game. Games kind of like Zeliard here, or Zeliard I believe it's pronounced, or stuff like Pools of Darkness. Now these are games that have VGA mode, and they'll run fine on a 286, but they'll probably could use a little bit of a bump from like a 386 system. Now the truth is, I already have systems that will play these games probably just fine. For instance, I have my main 286 build that I've done a video on in the past, and this would play those games just fine. Unfortunately, this is an EGA system. I have an EGA card in there and an EGA monitor, and it's kind of would be a bit of a pain to pull out the EGA card, put in a VGA card, set up a VGA monitor. It's just kind of a pain. I specifically use this for games that just support EGA and nothing higher. Although those games I mentioned and ones like them have EGA modes, and they will work on this 286. The other option is this guy right here, and I also did a video on this. This is my high-end 386. It has a Intel 33 megahertz 386 DX in there, and it should also run those games just fine, and games like it. It has a WDC VGA card in there, and that will run them just fine. There might be a couple instances where games like that might run a little bit fast, but there's a turbo button on it. I can turn off the cache. 95% of games that I want to run on this that are like the games I showed you would probably run just fine. But I don't know. I just kind of feel like this machine's just too fast for those games. Now, another option that would be perfectly fine for this kind of niche in my computer setup would be this guy, my PC Positive 286. I recently did a video on, and I gave this thing glowing reviews. This is probably the best OEM 286 I've ever come across, and it's just a good machine in general. 12 megahertz 286 has built-in VGA based off a Trident, clone of a Trident chipset, and it's got like lots of built-in I/O. It's just a great machine. But for what I'm wanting to do here, the 12 megahertz 286 should suffice for most of the games from like the 1990 period, but for what I'm doing, it's a little bit on the slow side, and also it's a 286, so any software that requires 386, obviously this won't run. So yeah, more or less unnecessary. I already have machines that will play VGA games that from that kind of like 286 to 386 era just fine, but I don't know. I still want to build this machine for those type of games. So more or less, I'm building this for sort of early VGA games that are kind of meant for a 286, but will kind of run on a 386. Could use the little extra bump of power from running on a 386. And that's basically why I'm building this guy. This is the case I'm going with. You have seen this case before if you follow my channel. Originally I think I had a Pentium in here, and then I actually had my 20 megahertz 286 build in here, and now I'm putting in this, and now I'm putting in a 386. So I think I'm going with 20 megahertz. What I'm going to have my 386 go, and the goal here is to basically kind of set this up as if it was a fast 286. So I'm going to try to use parts mostly from like the late 80s. So basically it's going to be kind of an early sort of 386 setup, the cards that you could easily find in a 286 as well. I like this case. It's nice and small. We've got all the drives we need: CD drive, 1.44 megabyte drive, 1.2 megabyte floppy drive. We've got a nice little megahertz LED display, turbo button, reset power, all the goodies with this case. And like I said, it's a small footprint, so it won't take up too much space. So here is the motherboard I'm going to be using for this project. It's not an older style motherboard. I guess it would go better with a low-end SX machine if I got like an older, maybe larger full AT motherboard. But since I am going to be using this machine quite a bit, I wanted something maybe a little bit more reliable. Not that I have a lot of SX options here for motherboards, but I like this one. I think it's like baby AT. It's a little bit bigger than some of the like baby AT boards that I've seen, but it's not too big. I haven't been able to identify this board. I have tested it. It does post. It comes up as a Scamp 386. That's a nice name for a little scamp. So it's a little scamp. But going on Google and searching, apparently there's several Scamp 386 motherboards, and I can't find this exact one. So I don't have any kind of manual to tell me certain things. Like, I don't know what these jumpers do. There's a jumper here I don't know. Other than that, we have some label jumpers here for the front I/O and stuff like that, and this is a external battery connector. So the main stuff, but there are a few things on here I'm not sure of. So that's a downside, but this should still work out fine. Now, as I think I briefly mentioned earlier, these SX motherboards, they were kind of like the low end compared to the DX 386 motherboard. So these would be more for like budget builds. A lot of OEMs love to use SX motherboards. These are 16-bit, not 32-bit. So overall, this motherboard, fits what I'm looking for. Of course, we have the power connector and AT keyboard connector. We have 4 slots for memory here. It uses 30-pin memory. Right now I have 8 megabytes of memory in there. I think that's what I'm going to go with. I could go with 4. I could maybe go with 16. That would be a lot. But I think 8 is a decent balance. But if you're building a similar build, you want to go for more or less, that's fine. We've got our full complement of slots here, ISA, and we have 2 8-bit ISA, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 16-bit ISA slots, so that should be more than enough for us. We have a VLSI chipset right here. Here's our CPU. On this guy, it is a 33 megahertz SL. It's an AMD chip soldered onto the motherboard. You'll notice As far as I've seen all of these SX 386 motherboards, the CPU is actually soldered on. There might be some with a socket, but as far as I've seen, they're all soldered on. I suppose theoretically you could desolder and remove the CPU and change it with another one. But this one has a 33 megahertz SX. That seems to be the most common of the SX CPUs. This is faster than I want to go with. I want, at the high end, 25 megahertz. So this is faster, but thankfully on these 386 boards you have a crystal oscillator here, and what the number is on this, it cuts it in half, and that's what your CPU speed is. So right here it is 66 megahertz, so cut that in half, it's the 33 megahertz for the CPU. So I can just cut this little strap here, pull this out, put in a different oscillator, and in theory I can make this run at whatever speed I want, as long as the motherboard can handle it. So I can throw in a 50 megahertz oscillator and we can be running at 25 megahertz. Also take note that the SX CPUs, even running at the same speed as the DX CPUs, it's going to be a little bit slower. So if we put this up against a 33 megahertz 386 DX, even though the clock speed's the same, the SX will run slower just because it's a 16-bit CPU as opposed to 32-bit. Again, I don't know how to go into the technical bits of that, but they're just generally slower. We have a slot for a math coprocessor. Unnecessary for this build, but I do have one, so I will be throwing in a math coprocessor. There is a little mystery to this board, and that's these sockets up here. I am not 100% sure what these are or what they do. I wish I had a manual. They could be, I think it's like DIMMs. They could be sockets for DIMM RAM. I think it's DIMM or DIP. For some reason I can't, it's eluding me at the moment. But those, this is memory you commonly see on 8088 to 8086 type motherboards. I've also seen this on a number of 286 motherboards, and you'd put your memory in here. But I don't know. These sockets are smaller than these ones. I don't really usually see that with that kind of like memory configuration. Usually they're all the same type of sockets. My other thought that jumps to my mind right away is this is for L2 cache, because sometimes the tag RAM for the cache is like a little bit smaller than what your main thing is. But one, why is there 4 sockets for a tag RAM? And this is kind of unusual on an SX board anyways. SX boards were usually seen as low end, and putting L2 cache on them was kind of a waste. It's not unheard of though. I do have this motherboard here, and this is like a high-end, low-end board. So this actually uses a 40 megahertz 386 SX. And although you don't see it on here, it does have L2 cache built into this motherboard. It's only 8K of L2 cache, but there is indeed L2 cache on this SX motherboard. So having L2 cache on an SX motherboard is not unheard of. It happens, but again, I'm not 100% sure if this is just like regular memory or L2 cache. If it's L2 cache, that's kind of unusual that it's like socketed, and that makes me wonder how much I could put on here. But again, for this build, I'm just leaving them empty because I actually don't want the L2 cache. I really don't want to speed this thing up all that much. I'm really going for more of like 286-ish feel and speeds for this machine, with the benefits of having a 386 and being able to process code and software that will can run on a 386 and not on a 286. So that's a look at the motherboard I'm using. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to install this guy and just kind of make sure it's posting and things like that. And once I have that running and it's stable, then the next step is I'm going to install the math coprocessor. Then I'm going to pull out this oscillator and change it to something a little slower. Maybe we'll go with 25 megahertz actually, and then we'll go from there and we'll look at what cards we're going to go with. It's probably worth mentioning too at this point that taking the speed down from 33 megahertz to 25 megahertz might not seem like a lot. It's only, what, 8 megahertz difference, but in this context it is kind of a lot, well, at least compared to a DX system. So my main 386, my high-end 386 is 33 megahertz DX. This I'm going to be running at 25 megahertz, and it's an XX. And it may not seem like a huge difference, like I said, 8 megahertz, but you have to understand too, it's not just 8 megahertz less than the CPU speed, it's the entire front side bus, so memory and everything else is running slower. And again, also it is 16-bit as opposed to 32-bit. So you would find that this 25 megahertz SX is going to run noticeably slower than the 33 megahertz DX. And I am going to add a math coprocessor. I suppose you could say adding a math coprocessor makes it a little bit more high-end, but I'm going to add one. It's probably not really going to get to see much use anyways, but I do want to add one. This one here is from ULSI. These aren't really the fastest math coprocessors for a 386. I believe Intel and Cyrix made the fastest ones, but again, this is going to see probably very little use. This is a Mathco SX, so I believe it's specifically for SX motherboards. It is rated at 25 megahertz. Alright, so we're installed in the case here. I have installed the math coprocessor. Hopefully it's in the right orientation. Sometimes it can be a little hard to tell with these type of sockets. Unfortunately with this case as well, I don't have like the metal bracket here, or cage or whatever it's called, so I can't actually utilize these two 3.5-inch bays. So I have to get creative with the hard drive, and I've done that before with this case. I have swapped out the CD-ROM drive. Yeah, it's something a little bit newer. I'll probably put something over this, but if I'm going to be using this extensively, I need a little bit faster and more reliable CD drive. Other than that, 1.2 megabyte floppy drive, 1.44 megabyte floppy drive. So I think I'm going to go with, I'm going to throw in this guy for you know, like parallel port, serial port, floppy drive controller, and IDE controller, and that will control the CD-ROM drive. So for the hard drive, I'm going to go with this combo here. You don't have to when you're putting together this kind of machine, but I'm going with an Adaptec SCSI controller here, and then I had to rig up this little hard drive here on a little bracket, and I'm just going to slot it over here. And I think this is 1.2 gigabytes, so we should be able to see all that, being that it's SCSI, and we have a SCSI controller. So you'll have, this is quite an extravagant hard drive. This would not be considered low end. I don't even know, like 1.2 gigabytes would be pretty high end and crazy for like the early 90s. So this part of things also wouldn't be considered low end. But I'm not going to like a super specific kind of completely period correct build with this machine. We're shooting for the early 90s, super late 80s maybe. But yeah, this should work fine. All right, let's see here. I've got the basic stuff. I have a video card in here. I'm using an ET4000 right now. Kind of minimal things set up. I'm not sure this is all going to work yet. I've got my monitor right here for testing, so let's hit power and see what happens. Okay, well that didn't come on. But we did get life over here, so that's good. Let's see what we get. Yep, Scamp 386 SX without combo, whatever that means. And of course there's no battery, so it's going to want me to run the setup. Alright, so it does seem like it booted into the hard drive. We've got MS-DOS 5.0, which I think is appropriate for a 386. I usually, on my 386s, I go DOS 5.0. This particular build, I could have went with DOS 4, but no thanks. I could have went with DOS 3.3 or something like that, but that's a little bit limiting for this build. And I'm not going for like strictly period correct stuff here. So, okay, so this is good. So now, it seems like the FPU, or the math coprocessor, is being detected. So now I just run some games and some tests, benchmarks, just to see if we're stable. If we're stable, then I'll go on to like cutting the, seeing if changing the oscillator will cut the speed down, and then we go over what cards I'm putting in it, like the final card, sound and video, and then we just look at some benchmarks and games. Now, the astute among you may have noticed during the post, EMM 386 was not showing up, and I soon realized that when I was testing some games, I was getting some like no EMS memory issues, and I couldn't figure out what happens, and for whatever reason it didn't set it up during my DOS 5.0 installation. I thought it automatically set up the EMM 386, but whatever, for some reason it didn't, so it was just a simple matter of going in and changing the I forget it. I think it was the auto exec bat or the sys bat. Anyways, it was just a simple matter of having that set up to run, and then it started running fine, and it was detecting and utilizing the EMS memory just fine, and then I didn't have any issues with games. But I just wanted to point that out. If you're setting up these old machines, if you're setting up like DOS 5 on a 386, and you're getting issues with like why am I getting like EMS memory errors with some of these games, just make sure that you're actually running I think it's high mem and the EMM 386 on startup, so to utilize that memory. So for a video card, I'm going with this guy here. This is an ATI VGA Wonder Plus from 1990. I'm not 100% sure on the amount of memory on this card, but it's either 256 or 512K. Either amount is fine. There were a lot of other cards I could have went with, and I thought about using. Remember, speed is definitely not my priority with this build. I'm going for something, along the lines of it's a slow 386, a fast 286, that kind of era. So I wasn't really concerned with putting in a fast video card. I had a couple things I was looking at. Of course, like something like the ET4000 was too fast for my takes, but if you're building something like that and you want something a little faster, knock yourself out. I was looking at an ET3000. Those are kind of dog slow chips, but the video on it was a little bit funny, and since I'm going to be using this machine a good bit, I wanted something with a little bit better quality. I was also thinking about a Trident card, like an 8900C or B or something like that, and I think that would have worked fine. Again, those cards aren't speed demons, but decent. They're decent all-arounders. But in the end, I went with something. Those cards were generally at like 91, 92. But I went with this guy here. Decent speed, not a super speed demon. I guess these would be considered this would have been a higher end card, I believe, for like 1990 when I believe this came out. But again, it's not a super speed demon, but it is speedy, 16-bit ISA. It does auto select, so it gives me VGA, and then I believe that's bus mouse, which I won't be using. And then I have a connector here because I think this also supports CGA and Hercules modes, I believe. So if I did decide I wanted to hook up like a TTL monitor, like CGA or a mono, I could with this card, and I don't have to like open up the case or anything like that. But again, primarily this build's focused on VGA. So yeah, this is the card I picked. This should work just fine for my purposes. So for sound, I went with this guy here, a nice 8-bit Sound Blaster 1.5. This is a pretty decent card. Of course, this card supports Sound Blaster, which was the de facto sound standard, as well as AdLib. I also have the additional chips here for CMS compatibility, which is the Creative Music System, since I will be running into games from this time period of like 1990-ish, give or take, that I'm going to be using this machine for. And some of those games might have Creative Music System sound, and maybe I want to go with that option. So that's why I choose this card here. Pretty decent card. I considered a couple other ones. Of course, you could go with something a little bit later, like a Sound Blaster Pro 2.0 would be perfectly fine for a build like this, but this is the one I decided to go with. And since the Sound Blaster does not support a MIDI, I'm going to have to use a dedicated MIDI card, and I have here a Music Quest MQX32. I believe the Music Quest cards do not have any kind of like hang-up bugs or hanging note bugs or anything like that. So I've never tested this card. It's the MQX32. I think I have another one of these, but it's a MQX16, I think, or something like that. But this one I've never had the opportunity to use. I do have the dongle for it, which has like 2 ins and 2 outs. You can see there. So I don't know. I think this was something a little bit more professional, where you could hook up like multiple devices to it. Pretty neat. Hopefully it works. And I feel like this is an important card for this build because, again, 1990, give or take, we are going to be running into games that are going to at least be using the Roland MT32 as a possibility for sound, and I want to be able to use that option when I'd like to. Alright, so we're about ready to rock and roll with this build. I've put all the cards in. Here's the hard drive, of course. MIDI card, the sound card, and the video card right there. I did swap out the crystal oscillator. It's probably hard to, it's underneath, tucked underneath the I/O card, I think. A little hard to see. But I did swap it out with a 50 megahertz oscillator, so we are running at 25 megahertz now. And I slapped a little tiny heatsink on the 386SX. That's even a low-powered SX. Definitely doesn't need it. But, you know, you can't go wrong with extra cooling. So, we're about ready to go, run some benchmarks, look at some games, of course. I did one other thing here. So because this is going to be a mission critical machine, I did pull the old, slow, unreliable CD drive, and I put in a newer drive here. So this should suit me much better. It also had a little, like a number, like the speed rating here, because it is a later drive, so it was like 39 something. It had the speed, and I put a little sticker over it. I don't know if the sticker looks worse or better, but I don't know. I don't know, I think it looks a little bit better, but since we're talking about the CD drive and the sticker, I'm going to take 5 minutes here to talk about some drama, because we all love drama. But speaking of these CD drives and the stickers, and like using newer CD drives in older machines and wanting it to look sort of aesthetically matching the rest of the machine, so I had a subscriber to this channel. I am not naming any names, but yeah, he was a subscriber and he was a fan of the channel, and he commented a lot, and he seemed like a nice guy, very complimentary to the channel. He went back and watched all my backlogs, and he commented on some older videos, and I always like that. And I commented him back to him, and I talked to him a little bit. Very nice guy, but he was a little over enthusiastic about hardware, I believe. So about a year or so ago, I did a video on a machine, and I talked about putting a newer CD/DVD drive in an older machine and wanting it to match. And I put a sticker on that one, but I also mentioned you could take like a Mr. Clean Magic eraser or something like that, and you could just sand it off. And that did not go over with him. He was very upset about that. I was destroying vintage hardware, and it's just, I don't think when we, and I'm sorry, I just don't share that point of view. Yeah, I think if you have like, it does make me sad if you have like a unique piece of vintage hardware and you just indiscriminately destroy it or something, but modification is something that has always gone on. People did it in the 80s, people did it in the 90s, people do it now. It's just part of the game. And I mean, it's your hardware. You can do whatever you want with it. Would it make me sad to see a pile of CD-ROMs just get smashed in a compressor? Yeah, I mean, I could use those things, but I don't usually lose sleep about people modifying their equipment. I don't really consider it destroying vintage hardware, but he took offense to that. I don't think he subscribed to the channel anymore because of it. But yeah, that's just some drama on that. He did bring up a valid point, like, oh, if you scrape the thing off, you don't know the speed or the type. But almost all of these I've seen have like a sticker on them or a model number. You could always look that up. I don't think that's an issue. But yeah, if you want to sand off like numbers to make it look like it matches your case more, I mean, I'm not going to lose sleep over that. I would do it myself, but just want you to know that's an option. So that was a little bit of drama to throw in on the video, because we all love drama. But yeah, like I said, I don't think he's subscribed anymore because he hasn't commented in a very long time. But if you are watching, dude, sorry, it's just It's just my opinion on things. But anyways, let's move along. Now we do have the question of a case badge. So Geek and Spiel does offer a 386DX case badge, which I have here on my 386DX, which I did a video on maybe a little over a year ago. But unfortunately he does not offer a 386SX badge. But I do have these two badges from him. You can find various case badges, Geek and Spiel, on eBay. So this one I have here, this is a 386 processor badge. And then there's this one here, 386 AMD. The SX processor I have in there is a AMD. Again, neither of them denote SX or DX for that matter. This one looks like, it's a little bit more fun. It has kind of like that color scheme. I forget what that's called, like Memphis design style. Really popular in the 90s and late 80s. This one seems a little more serious, I guess. But I think I'll go with this one. A little bit more fun. So I think I will go for this one for my SX machine. So the good news is I did get the megahertz LED, the power LED, and the hard drive activity light to work. Unfortunately, I can either get the megahertz display and power both on and dim, or one or the other being bright. So in the end, I decided to just go with them both being dim. It's probably some simple matter to fix that I haven't figured out yet, but like I spent well over an hour just getting these things to work at all. Now one other thing, I actually do have the software for the ATI VGA Wonder Plus card. And it has this neat kind of setup utility where you can do things like set up power mode, so you can set up like what it goes into. Like I have it set up for VGA. You can also set it for 18 or 16-bit operation. You can configure your monitor, little things like that. The mouse, the bus mouse, you can actually disable the port on there, which could be helpful if you're running into conflicts. So it's neat. It's a neat little thing to have. Usually in DOS, you don't really need to do anything with the video card. Even like VGA card, you just install it and it just works. But sometimes there are like utilities and drivers, and they can be handy, especially for something like this ATI card that has like TTL out and a bus mouse and a VGA like analog RGB out. So nice to have. No idea why there's 4 discs of software for this card, but it's nice to have. And the first thing we're going to look at is top bench, and we're getting a score of about 46, and that looks about right. It's saying our CPU 386SX at 25 megahertz. It's comparing it to like a Tandy SX25 and a 38620. Hitting the turbo button though, it shows we're going down to a speed equivalent to like an Intel 286 at 12 megahertz. So quite a bit of a power cut there with the turbo button, but I did want to confirm the turbo button on this system is indeed working. And here's our MIPS score. Probably the one to look at here is the comparison against a compact 386. I believe the compact 386 it's referring to in this benchmark is running it with a 16 megahertz DX maybe, and we're running a little bit faster than that, like 0.49. I believe that's how you read this. But yeah, there you go. There's our MIPS performance score for this machine. And now let's take a look at our obligatory benchmarks here. 3D Bench 1.0C, PCP Bench at 320 by 200, and Doom. This time Doom is running on low details. So the green is our 386SX at 25 megahertz. Make of those scores what you will. For fun though, I did want to compare it to my 386DX 33 megahertz. Please keep in mind though, this isn't like a direct comparison. I didn't try to make them as similar as possible except for the CPUs. They are quite different. The 386DX 33 megahertz I did a video on in the past. I would suggest checking it out. I think it's called, I'll put a link in the description at the end of the video, but it's my high-end 386, but it's running double the RAM as my SX. It has L2 cache. Of course, it's a DX running at 33 megahertz, and it also has a completely different video card. It's running like a WDC 16-bit ISA card, which is, in my tests, about as fast as an ET4000, if not slightly faster. So completely like different systems. So in that sense, it's not like a great comparison, but it is a good comparison just as far as my real setup, like the full SX system against my full DX system. This is how they compare, and as you can see right here, the DX system does noticeably better than the SX system in all three of these tests. Doom is a little bit different because on the DX system I'm actually running it in low detail but in full screen, where the benchmark on the SX system, it was put down to like the smallest viewable window in order for it to actually get a half decent benchmark score. So yeah, those are the benchmarks. Take a look here, and then let's actually move on. Let's look at some games running on this system, specifically the type of games that I'm going to be playing on it, but I'll try to get a mix of different kind of games running here. And you are all probably expecting this one. This is Wing Commander, the first one, well known, infamous as a very speed sensitive game. I found this game to run fine on this system, if maybe a tad bit slow. Again, I've not really played, I really mean to play this game through one day because it really is kind of up my alley, but I've never gotten to like the end of this game where I hear a lot more goes on and it could slow down on slower systems. So beginning of the game seems to run acceptably, if not a tad on the slow side, but I would suspect later in this game it really bogs down. I have heard that 25 megahertz, 20 to 25 megahertz is the kind of area, like the perfect CPU speed for this game overall, but I think they're referring to a DX and not an SX. And I did just want to point out, because I am very familiar with Eye of the Beholder 3, that beginning intro is quite sluggish compared to how this game runs on a faster 386 or a 486. So, yeah, 1993, even a game like this, which is kind of like a dungeon crawler, is pushing this machine a little bit. I can definitely feel the sluggishness in this game on this machine, and even like the loading in between things. It's quite a bit more sluggish than I'm used to on, like I said, a faster 386 or a 486. That's not to say it isn't playable. It is quite playable, but again, there's better systems even to play something like this on.
Torpedoes away. Aye, aye, sir. 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 Torpedoes away.
Watch out! A poisonous snake!
Excuse me, young man. Sorry to bother you, but I couldn't help but notice you sitting there on that log. I was wondering if there was anything wrong.
Why, yes. As a matter of fact, there is. I've been searching everywhere for my fiancée. She's a beautiful princess with long golden tresses.
A large, venomous snake blocks Graham's passage to the east.
Stay away. This is my path. Stay.
That wasn't wise, Graham. He who speaks with forked tongue should never be trusted.
Now, I did try testing the creative music system mode with these two suspicious looking chips here. that I don't recall where I got. And unfortunately there was a problem. Whenever I would use like Game Blaster mode or Creative Music System mode, there would be this persistent like staticky hum over everything, which was unfortunate. I tried pulling the CMS chips and cleaning the sockets, and I even tried like when I tried switching chips in the sockets, and that made it even worse. So I'm going to have to order new chips. I'm pretty sure it's the chips that are the issue. I guess it could be the card, but yeah, I did order new chips that are slightly less sussy looking. So hopefully when those arrive, that will fix the problem. But until then, yeah, it doesn't really sound good, as you can hear here. Alright, and just to wrap things up before we go into like my final talk about this build, we've been listening to all these games through with the Sound Blaster sound, so FM Synth, Sound Blaster. I haven't really tested out the that MXQ, I think 32M MIDI card. So I wanted to do that with just a couple games, and I went to test it, and it wasn't working. No matter what I would do, it would not work. And then I remembered I've had this issue before when I've used SCSI drives and cards, and what was happening is the address of the SCSI controller was set to 330, so I needed to change that, so I changed it to a different address that's not an address MIDI cards use, so it's not 300 or 330, it's like some weird number that doesn't seem to be conflicting with anything. And I did that, and it now works. So the Thexter 2, which we looked at a minute ago, it has a nice little sound selection when it starts up, so that's a good way to test the MT32 support, which is, you can see it is working, but let's just give it a quick listen here with Thexter 2. Alright, so I can go down here to Music, and then let's just pick Moonlight Sonata. So that's a really good track on the MT32. So it sounds really good in my opinion. I mean, of course I could get better speakers, but for what these speakers are, it actually sounds really good. So that's nice. So now I've got MIDI's working fine, everything seems to be working fine, so I'm pretty happy. Unfortunately, this card does lock up on Wing Commander. My MQX16 does not, but this MQX32 does. I believe it has something to do with like the BIOS chip version number. The lower ones seem to work fine on this game, but the higher version chip on this MQX32, it locks up on the intro here with Origin FX. So I thought that might happen. I've heard that happens with these. Now, unfortunately, you may or may not have noticed there is one glaring issue with this setup, and that is I can't necessarily mix the sound. So maybe if you noticed during Zilliard, there weren't any sound effects, just I only played like the music playing. And that's because the Sound Blaster 1.5, there's only 2 ports on the Sound Blaster 1.5. One is a mic jack input, which from what I understand cannot be configured as like a line in, and then there's a line out. So there's no way to mix it. Usually you would run, from the MIDI it would go to the MT32, and then you'd run a cable from the MT32 into your sound card, and then your sound card would mix them, and then it would output to the speakers. Obviously I don't have a line out or anything on this card, so it's only one at a time. You either get the MT32 music, or you're plugged into the sound card and you're getting like FM or Game Blaster or whatever. Now, of course, there are some games that give you the option of music on the MT32 and then PC speaker for sound, but that's not necessarily ideal. Unfortunately, I don't really have a solution for this right now. The only really solution I have found is getting an external audio mixer. So I would run I run audio out of the MT32 and the sound card that go into a mixer, and then the mixer would mix them, and then it would go out to the speakers. I don't have a mixer, an external mixer. I've never used one for that matter, so that's something I'm going to have to get for the future for this machine. Will I have one in time for finishing this video? Probably not, but I just wanted to make everyone aware of that. And even, I don't think, even with the software for the Sound Blaster 1.5, I don't even think there's like a mixer software for it. So even if somehow like the mic could be configured as some kind of like line in, I'm not even sure there's like mixer software to make that happen anyway. So it looks like I'm probably going to have to go and acquire some kind of external mixer device. So this was my 386 SX build, and I'm quite happy with it. It turned out how I wanted it to. It fills that little niche in my setup for those kind of like early VGA games that just will play on something like my 33 MHz DX, but just, I don't know, they just feel a little bit better on this machine. This build was more of kind of like a feel sort of build, because like I said at the beginning of this video, I have other machines that fill the niche pretty well, and like I said, my 33 MHz DX build, especially with the turbo button, would have likely played 90% of the games I'm going to play on this just fine. But again, I'm still happy with this little guy for my setup. For your personal setup at home, I don't know, you might be better off going with the DX build if you want. If you're wanting to play a little bit, like have a little bit more flexibility with playing some later games that may need some more horsepower, I'd say if it came between, you know, a 386 SX and a 286, I think the 286 definitely has it in the coolness factor. I love my strictly EGA setup 286 with the EGA monitor, 16 MHz 286. It's just, it has a coolness factor to it. But the VGA and the 386 SX, it's just a little bit more flexible. It's just a little bit more capable. So, I mean, if you had the choice and you wanted to build something from that era, I definitely would suggest you go with like a 386 over a 286. Now, the little issues with this, well, first off, for the LED here, yeah, I spent the better part of an hour trying to get these to be brighter. I can get one or the other. I can either have a bright power or a bright megahertz display, but I can't do both. And it seems like it's just a simple matter of like check the connections, you know, make sure where it's plugged in right. But like I said, I spent over an hour and I just couldn't do it. It's not a big problem. With the lights out, it's pretty viewable, actually. And generally I play these like in the dark anyways, so I don't need it to be like super bright. It's good enough. As for the other issues going on, I did order some new like Philips chips for the Sound Blaster for the Game Blaster Creative Music System compatibility from a slightly less shady Chinese source. So I was hoping those would show up before I finished this video, but it's going to be a while till they get here. I selected the wrong symbol. Anyways, yeah, so hopefully that will clear up that issue when those chips get here. There's also the issue with the mixer. I'm going to have to buy some kind of external mixer if I want to use, if I want to play a game that's using both MT32 or some kind of MIDI module, as well as Sound Blaster sound. If any of you guys have a suggestion for like an external cheap mixer, let me know. because I would like, preferably unpowered, unless you can give me a compelling reason that I need to get one that's powered for externally mixing those, so I can get both at once if I want to. But other than those little issues that seem perfectly solvable, I am really happy with this machine. It's pretty cool. Like I said, it's going into my permanent setup right next to my 33 megahertz DX. I'm not sure which one of them will get more use, but this covers this, and that covers the whole 386 era for me. So I was really happy to put this thing together. I hope you like this video. Let me know in the comments what you think about this build, your experience with the 386 SX, and thank you for watching. So I'll see you in the next video. Alright, so actually as I'm editing the video, those Philips chips for the CMS compatibility, Game Blaster compatibility came in. I opened up the machine, I replaced the chips with the new ones I just got, and this is actually where I put it in my setup. There's my 33 megahertz high-end DX 386, and then here is the SX machine next to it, so I have both of my 386s in one area here. And I have Indie set up to run in Game Blaster mode, so let's see how it sounds. I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to run it. Okay, already sounding better, as far as Game Blaster goes anyways. Alright. So yeah. Definitely it seems like that was the issue. It seems like those were just bad chips with the on the car, the Philips chips. For the Game Blaster compatibility mode, replace those chips. Seems to sound okay now, so it looks like at least that's one issue fixed. I still need to get a mixer, but it seems like the Sound Blaster CMS Game Blaster mode issue has been fixed with the new chips. Alright, thanks for watching, guys.